Assalamu alaikum everybody who's joining. Welcome to our talk today by Sister Sidra. We are very lucky to have Sister Sidra with us today. She's a very renowned speaker, mashallah, in our community. We're seeing that quite a few people are joining, so welcome everybody. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to you all. If I could request that everybody puts their video off as well, if that's okay, so that we can, we can let Sister Sidra be the only person on the screen. As I said, it's nice to see you all. Alhamdulillah, we have people already and more people are joining. Some messages. Assalamu alaikum to everybody from Tajmeed to everybody, and Sister Gulsan as well. And as I said, we're going to have a very good talk today, inshallah. Looking forward to it very much. This is the first of several talks that we're going to be having, inshallah, on health. We are quite keen on promoting health and not just sort of Islamic talks, but non-Islamic talks on various health issues. Just a couple of words about CICC. I'm sure you all know about CICC, Colchester Islamic Community Centre. We started in 2017 as a charity, and the idea was to bring people together and to build a community centre and masjid. We've bought a place, so welcome everybody. I'm now going to sort of give a brief introduction about Sister, who is going to talk about autism. Sister Sidra Naeem, she's a SENCO, Special Educational Needs Coordinator, for over 20 years, very experienced. She's got a master's and MSc in Special Education Needs and Disabilities, mashallah. She lectures in Special Education Needs at university, in the teacher training degrees and MSc programs. She's also finds time to be a Muslim chaplain, mashallah, in educational, retail and health sectors, supporting adults for mental health. And you might have seen a few lectures on TV, and she's very prominent, mashallah, in our community, and that's very nice to see. She's been in TV programs linked with special needs, mental health and well-being, social and emotional behavior problems and disabilities, and she runs training programs for special needs with teachers and parents. There's quite a list, Sister Sidra, mashallah, alhamdulillah. So that's very good. We're very lucky to have her today. And for those who are joining, assalamu alaikum to all of you. We're going to start the talk in a minute. As just to remind you once again, if I could ask everybody to mute their microphones and to turn their video off so we can just concentrate on Sister Sidra. No questions during the session. If I can ask that people wait till the end, and then please send the questions on the chat group, and then inshallah I will deliver the questions to Sister Sidra, and in that way we'll be able to answer them in a nice, fair way. So if everybody is happy, inshallah we'll start. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Sister Sidra. Assalamu alaikum and welcome.
Wa alaikum assalam, everybody, and thank you very much for inviting me today to do this lecture on autism. I'd just like to start off by saying that I'm really pleased that a mosque is actually covering topics like these. I think it's very important in today's society, especially amongst the Muslim community, where special educational needs, mental health, these kinds of topics have got a huge stigma. So I think it's very important that these topics are covered. And Colchester Mosque, actually, I'm pleased to say, out of all the mosques that I know, is way ahead of its time when it comes to promoting these kinds of topics. So I do have a PowerPoint to share. And just a couple of other things. I'm also the Special Needs Governor at KEGS, King Edward Grammar School. And I'm also incorporating SEND into state schools, into the state schools curriculum in Pakistan as well at the moment, which I think is a great breakthrough there. I've represented primary SENCOs for Essex County Council. I've done many training programs for SENCOs in Essex. I think some of the other ones Brother Sahel has already mentioned. Parenting courses as well for behaviour, mental health, emotional development in children. So going on now to autism. This is actually a 1 hour long lecture, and that's actually, believe it or not, simplified, because usually an autism lecture you need a whole day really of training to do. So this is going to be a very, very simple overview for people, and it's not just for people who have autism or for people who have got children who have got autism. It's for the whole community really, for awareness, so they can understand other people. This lecture is in 4 parts, and the first part we are going to look at the science behind the disorder. Then we will look at the symptoms exhibited, and then we will look at the diagnosis procedure, and then interventions, which we will have an overview of. So autism is actually one of the special needs categories, and it's under communication and interaction, as you can see on that grid. And it is actually the highest category of need nowadays is autism in the schools, and it's also the growing category as well. Autism is a developmental disorder which affects the brain's normal development of social and communication skills. It's commonly referred to as ASD, which is Autism Spectrum Disorder, and that covers different kinds of autism, but they are all nowadays categorized under ASD, which is the big, large umbrella. And looking at the science, I think it's absolutely crucial that we understand the science of autism, because if you understand the science of it, then you can understand why people then exhibit the symptoms that they exhibit, and we can also try and understand them better. So with autism, neurons are missing or not working properly in the brain, leading to incomplete brain circuits. So in order for a brain to function properly, all the neurons need to be strong, and the circuit, like an electric circuit, needs to be complete without any gaps. So this is actually a brain of which shows a normal connectivity. And as you can see, those white lines show good connections between all the neurons. And then if we look at a brain, an autistic brain, there is underconnectivity there. So as you can see, the white lines, some of them are much, much more thinner. And this is then why there are problems with people who have autism. Either those lines are very thin or they don't exist at all in autism, depending on how severe the person is. And those connections are needed really in a normal state. They are needed there for a uniform rhythmic brainwave activity, which is relatively uniform across the brain's cortex. So that is what happens if somebody does not have autism. However, if somebody has autism, it is actually near the front of the brain that there are neurons missing or very weak. It's because of that reason that the symptoms are exhibited. So in an autistic brain, neural communication is inconsistent between the front and back parts of the brain. The neurons fire randomly in disorganized, chaotic patterns. This then leads to sensory overload and anxiety. A comparison of the EEG there, if you look at the small little circles there in the middle, shows a darker color with someone with autism because there is less rhythmic activity. Boys are actually affected more because they have less communication skills than girls in the first instance on the whole. And the front part of the brain is very, very important because of these reasons. In recognizing and interpreting facial emotions in others, in organizing emotional responses. It also brings together information from other parts of the brain to build an integrated picture of our social environment. It also helps with decision-making, planning, and reasoning. And it helps also with language processing. And autism is actually comes down the line either through nature. 80% of autism is genetically actually runs through families and comes down through the genetics or biological influences. On the whole, because my first degree was in biotechnology, which covered genetics, if the child has autism and it is genetically inherited, if it's the eldest child, it's usually inherited from the father. If it's the second born child, then it is inherited from the mother on the whole. And if it's the third child who has autism, that child is usually a mixture of the mother and the father. Sometimes it can skip a generation as well. And don't forget that the previous generations, autism didn't exist. It's a new diagnosis, and you have to really look at the behavior patterns or the personality of the ancestors, where it may have come from, rather than a diagnosis, because schooling was very different in those days as well. So autism may not have been there to diagnose in the first place. People just put things to personality in the olden days. And then the rest of autism, if anybody does have it, is because of nurture, which is the environment, which is actually growing nowadays. And these can be because of social influences, where the neuron pathways are not being made in the first place, because we are not using that part of the brain. You need to use parts of your brain in order for neural pathways to be made. So, for example, there may not be any communication due to our phones, or mothers too busy to talk to their children or working. I did actually go to a speech and language course once, and they said that more and more children are exhibiting autistic traits because their parents are not talking to them. So they're growing up with speech and language problems, but also the speech and language connections are not being made in the brain. And then the other type is brain damage, which can happen either in a car accident. For example, I do know one child who was perfectly normal, had a car accident, and then the frontal part of his brain was damaged, and then he became autistic. Or, for example, difficult births where forceps are used on the frontal part of the head, and that can also damage neurons as well. So autism is rising nowadays, and I wanted really to open up the question to the audience on why they think that may be. So any ideas why that may be? Does anybody want to put their hand up?
Is it because there's more awareness in society now, whereas previously before, in traditional societies, it was sort of frowned upon, so people kind of avoided it?
Yes, that is correct. Both of those, actually. So well done. There is a lot more awareness nowadays. So, you know, SENCOs are around as well, and autism is out there. So obviously you're going to hear about it more. And also the stigma is decreasing. So more and more people are going out there and welcoming a diagnosis for autism. However, I do feel in the Asian community, I work a lot within the Muslim community, the stigma is still there, because we are looking back home into our home countries where autism is actually not really out there like mental health yet. Our home country is actually 10 years behind when it comes to mental health and autism. So in a way, we're sort of going along those cultural norms. Okay, any more reasons why autism is rising nowadays? I did give you some clues in the actual nurture section.
Sorry, could there be the increase of recreational drugs?
Yes, that is another one. Yes, so any drugs that are being taken during pregnancy can stop neurons being formed as well in the brain of the child, and also child take drugs later on in their teenage years that can have an effect, but more in pregnancy. Okay, I'll have one more and then I'll give you some answers.
People have busy lifestyles, and because of that they don't communicate well with their children, and as a result of that, you can see
Yes,
there's a rise.
correct. So lack of communication, mobile phones, a big problem. It means the children are not developing social skills. And because they're not developing, they're not talking and they're not communicating, it's not making those neural pathways at the front part of their brains. So that is a good answer as well. Right, I'm going to give you some answers now. So one of them is damage at birth and premature births. So there has been a huge increase in autism because premature babies are being saved early. In the olden days, babies wouldn't be saved early, and nowadays they're being saved as early as 22 weeks, which means that a lot of the connections and nerves are not completed in the brain. And a baby actually needs a full 9 months for it to develop properly, and the fine-tuning of the brain actually happens in the last few weeks of pregnancy. So full-term pregnancies are important, and because of that as well, lots of older mums are having children late, which means the eggs are older, they're more likely to crack, all the rest, IVF treatments, twin babies, all of that has a big effect on autism and special needs in general. Okay, and then the other one, somebody also mentioned, is there's a lack of social interaction, computers, television, computer games, that is a very big one. And there was actually a survey done with about 1,000 parents, and 20 of the children were autistic because the parents just left the children in front of computer screens, television, mobile phones all day. Also busy lifestyles. So if you look at the lifestyle at the top where everybody was talking, sitting around the dining table, and if you look at it nowadays, we definitely know that there is far less communication nowadays. There are also other very big factors, and motor control development is actually slower nowadays, because what's happening is we are actually restricting our children from crawling and doing other kinds of motor control, all of which make neural pathways across both sides of the brain. Very, very important. We'll cover some of this in a minute. So there is a crawling baby. That is actually the mechanism, cross crawl, which is needed to develop neural pathways on both sides of the brain. But if you look at the first baby in the picture on the left, that baby isn't crawling and it's not building up those pathways. So we use stair gates a lot nowadays to stop a baby going up the stairs, which is actually crucial for building up neural pathways across the midline. And this is something I will talk about later on when I look at how to make autism better. So the left-right movement. Also, and there is somebody in a car chair, and it doesn't go around with the balance of the car. It's all restricted. Restricted, the balance doesn't come. We've got another high chair there. And there's also these kinds of things inside baths which stop the baby swimming around. All of that stops it getting good motor control development, which is actually one of the symptoms of having autism, believe it or not. Okay, let us now look at the symptoms. There is usually a delayed or lack of speech. And this is actually due to the circuit being incomplete in your brain. And Asperger's syndrome, which actually is now not there anymore, it's still classed under autism. Asperger's syndrome was one kind of autism that had a normal language development. or it was another name was high functioning autism, which does not have language delay. However, they do show inappropriateness of speech later on within conversation. And then part of delayed or lack of speech is the term echolalia, where a child especially may repeat other words or sentences. Okay, echolalia I've mentioned. Children will normally speak in a monotone voice. I have seen adults do this as well. By monotone, we mean flat, a flat voice, because the voice does not correlate with emotions. Remember, the connections are not there. And again, the same kind of concept is where a person will talk in a slight tune. I know somebody used to talk in a tune as a child, and they still do as an adult as well, with a slight ring at the end of each sentence. That is actually one of the signs of autism. Repetitive movements of the body, such as arms and head. So you may find head rocking, flapping arms and legs as well. Again, this is because of the neural breakages in the pathways, a little bit like an electric shock when electric circuit is broken in the middle. It's a little bit like that, and it's a little bit like tics, this concept is as well. And then impaired social skills, which is the main one. These traits can be seen especially in crowds or groups. And this is why teachers will always pick up this concept at school much sooner than a family will do at home. You may be surprised if a teacher may come and say to you that, I think your child's autistic, he or she doesn't mix in with crowds. And you'll say, no, they're absolutely fine at home. But that's because it's a very small crowd at home. It's not a huge playground or a huge class. Social skills do not come natural to anybody who has autism. And it comes more from copying others. So you may find that they either copy others, sometimes even following the wrong crowd, or they don't copy anybody and they don't learn, because they don't even have the cues to even look at the person. Children actually have to be told what to do, and then they have to do it in order to learn, because it does not come naturally. So let's have a look at some of the things. They will appear completely uninterested in talking or making conversation. So here is a picture actually showing just that. They're not interested. Inappropriate responding, they may say things, for example, to deliberately annoy you. You may be telling them off and they'll laugh in your face. They may say things which don't add up to what you're asking them, or they may even ignore you. Inappropriate responding means ignoring a question. You're asking them a question. What did you eat today? And they don't even answer you. Okay, so it is quite annoying, but it may not occur to them that they have to answer you, and you have to teach them. When somebody asks you a question, you have to answer them. And when you ask them a question, they may say one word answer, or they may say they don't know, despite having a good vocabulary. This is because they don't really know what to say. And because of that, the easy way out is a one-word answer, or I don't know, a very, very quick way of doing things. Or you may find that their processing is slow. So they need to process what you are saying. And in the meantime, they'll say, I don't know, while they think about what you're saying. Again, this is why I showed you that brain. With the breakages, it will take them time to interpret what you are saying. They will have limited eye contact, and that is due to sensory overload, which we will talk about later on as one of the other separate symptoms. And then it may not occur to them to smile back if you are smiling at them. Limited smiling, you will always see autistics, they don't really smile in public. They feel pressurized. At home, they're smiley, they're jokey, they're laughing. In public, there's too many social cues for them to think about, for them to even think about smiling a lot of the time. They do not always understand jokes, or sarcasm is more difficult for them. And idioms. I'm looking at idioms like, it's raining cat and dogs out there. And they'll look out the window and they'll say, but there's no cats and dogs out there. So idioms are very, very difficult for them to understand because it's just too much extra for them to think about. And they do have difficulty with verbal and non-verbal communication and emotional situations. So when we're saying non-verbal, we're looking at body language. From a body language, they may not realize that somebody's getting angry with them. They may laugh when somebody's angry and red-faced. They may not react appropriately. For example, if somebody's crying, they may laugh. They don't understand, why is that man or woman crying? They may not be able to relate to it either. And they're not very good at making friends. Autistics will have very few friends. And they do show lack of empathy. That does not mean that they do not have empathy. It just means that they do not know how to show it. So, you know, for example, one of the children in my school where I worked for over 21 years as a special needs coordinator, there was this girl and she would poke other girls' eyes in and would laugh. And the other girls would cry when she did it. And she used to find that funny. She found it very, very amusing to do that. And they sometimes can be very withdrawn, especially in public, like they don't have a tongue in their mouth. And yet home, they're absolutely fine. There is also a problem with development of motor skills, so they may appear clumsy. Again, it's because of the nerves, the communications in the brain. Sometimes, you know, the brain doesn't add up with the body. There's connections missing. So they may trip over, they may be clumsy. And that actually I have seen in all autistics in my job, all of them. We have put them through the motor control program to try and make them better. Okay, let's look at play now. They prefer to play on their own. They do not play interactive games well with others. They prefer to spend time by themselves rather than with others. That's because they're not sure how to interact. They find it difficult, so they just play on their own. They find it hard to share or turn take. And that is actually one also that I've found across the board with autistics. In a way, they can be portrayed as selfish sometimes. They never want to share anything. Even if they've got lots of that item, they don't want to share it. And they can actually be pursued as being selfish sometimes. They do have very narrow interests. Again, their neural pathways only go in a certain direction, so they may not be very varied in the types of hobbies that they like. And sometimes those interests are so specific. So I used to have a boy in my school where he had memorized all the train timetables off completely by heart, right down to seconds in Brentwood only, but not in any other station, which we found very, very intriguing. They have difficulty with pretend play. Okay, so like I said, they take things literally, so then pretend play, role play, they are going to find it very, very difficult. They lack imaginative skills, and this is the reason why they will find role play and pretend play difficult. And also they like books which are factual information books. They're not really into fairy tales or imaginative or or fiction books. They're into facts. encyclopedias, dictionaries, maps, that kind of stuff. They prefer ritualistic play. And what we mean by that is they can be very strong in their routine. They will play with the same toys at the same time every day. They may use the same glass every time to drink in, and they have very, very rigid behavior rituals. They're very rigid in the behavior. Again, don't forget, I showed you the brain at the beginning with the rigid pathways. And they have a very short attention span. And I will talk to you a little bit about this later on. They are picked up very early in nursery, usually by the age of 3. I have had statements coming into my school already diagnosed with autism, and that's because the nursery nurses picked up all of these rituals just through them playing. Usually autistics, they learn visually. They are very, very visual, and they may be excellent at visualizing great detail in pictures, and some of them are very, very good at art, often, you know, with huge intricate design in their artwork and things like that, and they learn visually as well. Sensory overload is a very, very big one. The neurons fire randomly in disorganized, chaotic patterns in the brain. This then leads to sensory overload. And some people with autism may be sensitive to light, to sight, to hearing, to touch, to smell, or taste. They are either oversensitive, or some like hard touch or very strong tasting things. And some will then, on the other hand, hurt if somebody even touches them softly. So I've got a couple of things here across the board. When it comes to touch, a lot of autistics find haircuts very painful. They cannot deal with people touching or combing their hair sometimes as well. Some of them need to feel the ground on the floor, so they will walk hard on their tiptoes. This is all to do with sensory. They will also stamp their feet when walking up the stairs. And they will find certain sounds intolerable, and hand dryers is the top one, which I found in my school. But we have had others. We've had children, for example, who could not get rid of the buzzing of the light noise while they were working. It was really loud to them, even though it's just a background noise for a lot of us. And they feel sick when looking at paisley patterns. It's too much for their brain to interpret, and they feel dizzy. The other one is sticky labels. I had one child who would scream if he had a label digging in the back of his neck. So his mum had to cut off all his labels. And I know another child who loves roller coasters and never gets dizzy because they love the sensory feel of roller coasters, and without looking at the consequences of how dangerous something can be. So it's two-way. It's either they need the sensory input or they feel it too much. Now, the other very important thing which nobody ever talks about, which I am going to talk about with my science background, is that because the neural pathways are missing in the frontal part of the brain, the chemicals in their brain, the dopamine, the serotonin, the norepinephrine or the noradrenaline, which are all the chemicals in your brain which are needed for alertness, for memory, for appetite, for satisfaction, for sleep. All of those chemicals are imbalanced towards the front of the brain. They may be accumulated on the endings of some nerves, and on the endings of some nerves they may not be there. There is generally an imbalance of neurotransmitters and chemicals in the brain of an autistic. And for that reason, that person may display symptoms of either ADHD, which is hyperactivity, or ADD, which is opposite. It's ADHD without the hyperactivity. They may display irritability, they will display mood swings, they will get angry, sleep difficulty, another big one, and eventually mental health problems when they're older, if some of those things are not remedified as, while they are young. So that is, I think, a very, very important one. So because of that, they will exhibit attention problems. They get bored very, very easily. They do have limited interests anyway, so they will get bored. They need stimulation. So when a teacher is teaching, she needs to incorporate visual activities, auditory activities, kinesthetic activities, constant questioning, that kind of stuff to keep the pupil awake and integrated into the classroom. And the chemical imbalance also leads to anxiety problems, anxiety symptoms. And this slide here gives you at least 50 symptoms of anxiety, which you can read in your own time. You can always watch the link afterwards and pause on the slides, or you can, as I'm doing this, you can screenshot those slides for you to look at later, because if I did this in detail, we would be here for a lot longer than an hour. The anxiety is especially shown in social situations or when a child is out of routine, especially when all of a sudden they've got to do something and they haven't planned for it in the day, or they don't know what is to happen next. And anxiety also leads to phobias, which is very, very common in children who have got autism. One of the most common phobias is cleanliness, a little bit of OCD. So that one is another one to be mindful of. Because of all the neural pathway breakages and all the neurotransmitters and all the chemical imbalance, an autistic child or person will always display traits of other things as well, especially nowadays. And I have seen in my 21 years of being a SENCO, more and more people are displaying mixed traits, not just of autism, but obviously they will have the sensory diagnosis as well. And in addition to that, they will almost always, believe it or not, have ADHD or ADD, and dyspraxia is always there as well. And some of them may have added dyslexia as well, all three of those mixed. Now we need to get to the diagnosis side. So if your child displays any or all of those traits which you have seen, and I want to make it very clear here that everybody watching this talk will definitely have some traits of autism. Everybody has. We all have some traits of autism, okay? But the difference comes in is where a child will display several of those traits that I've mentioned. That is then when you may need to seek action. So the first person you need to go and see is the special needs coordinator. So a special needs coordinator, some of you may not know, is actually a specialized teacher. You have to have been a teacher for at least 4 years before you then do a master's degree nowadays in special educational needs. And then you become a SENCO. And a SENCO must be qualified and is responsible for coordinating SEND, which means special educational needs and disabilities. And she is, or he is, the one who provides provision. And normally they are part of the senior management team. Nowadays, a school may not employ a separate special needs coordinator, but the deputy head or the head teacher or the assistant head will always be the SENCO nowadays. So they are specialized in their subjects, because I have had many parents who will go to the teacher for help without realizing it is actually the special educational needs coordinator that they need to speak to. So the first person you need to go and see is the special needs coordinator, and she has social and communication checklists or indicator tests in the school, some of which are actually the very same ones that the pediatrician would do. They are the professionals. I would also like to say at this point, a school is usually the first person who will contact you if you think that there is a problem, because they are more likely to see the autism in school than you are to see it at home, because they are more likely to see the child in huge social situations. If the school has not brought it up, you may not need to worry. However, there is no reason why you can't go to a school and mention that you've seen these traits. So the first thing the special needs coordinator will do is to observe your child in the classroom, see if they've seen any of those traits. And if they have, then they will complete an indicator test or a screening questionnaire like this one. There are many. And also any overlap. So ADHD is another one, because what the special needs coordinator will try and find is which traits is it the one that is the most? Which one is it that is more apparent? Is it the ADHD? Because maybe the child's got ADHD and the autism is less, or maybe the child has something else. So this is the teacher's Pupil's rating scale, and there are many tests. I used to have them all. This one is the Connors teacher rating scale, which is actually the main one which the pediatrician usually uses, looking at if the child has ADHD or ADD traits. There's normally two parts of that. Okay. Then the teacher will give you the result, and they may even ask you to also do a tick list at home. It is that tick list then that you will take to your lovely GP, who hopefully will be like in that top picture there with open arms, and will then refer you to a pediatrician. The pediatrician then will observe your child and will then diagnose your child if they have autism, with the diagnosis, usually with an additional diagnosis of sensory disorder as well. The other thing which I will definitely mention here from my experience is that autism is on the rise. In the olden days, it was very easy to give somebody a diagnosis of autism. Nowadays, because autism is on the rise, the goalposts have risen. Because the goalposts have risen, it is more difficult to diagnose now, get a diagnosis for autism. And I've seen this through the 21 years I was a special needs coordinator. Towards the end, they very clearly were autistic. However, the pediatrician did not diagnose them because they were not as high as what she had seen. Okay, so I don't think anybody should worry as long as they are getting the help and support in the school. And that's the part that I'm going to come to next. So the national curriculum is not good enough really to support children who have autism. And the national curriculum has very less social and communication skills incorporated in there. It's all about literacy, numeracy, and maths and science nowadays. And if your child does have a diagnosis, it is actually government law in the Education Act that special educational needs provision is made for that child. I personally feel that if a teacher comes up to you and says, you know what, your child needs to go on the special needs register, because they have traits of this, this, and this. You should welcome that opportunity, because teachers do know what they are talking about. They are going out of their way to help your child, and by putting your child on the special needs register will mean the school will give them help. So do take that advice. And children who have a special educational needs or learning disability then does call for special education provision to be made for them. A greater difficulty in learning usually they have than the majority of children of the same age, and that includes any medical condition which autism comes under, which prevents them from making use of the education facilities. This is in comparison to the latest Special Needs Code of Practice. That special needs provision will be there right up to 25 years old, right up to postgraduate years in university, which I think is excellent. In the olden days, a child would be lost once they went to college and into secondary, secondary education and things like that. So it's very, very good that's there. This is the special needs grid. So special needs provision, you will be put on 3 levels, either additional needs or higher needs or an education healthcare plan. Now I have got a separate lecture on my YouTube channel, which actually is very in-depth about the process of special educational needs, the different tiers, and what happens in every tier. So if you want to go more into special education and the tier system within schools, you can search on my YouTube channel. But I'm going to just cover it very lightly here. There are 3 waves of provision which can be made. The very first tier at the bottom is just to do with classroom teaching, wave 1, inclusive high quality teaching, which is just done within the classroom, where, for example, a teacher may just put up a visual timetable for autistic children, or may explain during the day, first we're going to do this, then it's going to be break, then we're going to do this. With somebody who's got a diagnosis, it's not good enough. They need to come out of the classroom for additional programs, which happens in the second tier, wave 2. And if they have an EHCP, the higher needs level needs to be adhered to, where they will have personalized interventions. The SENCO will be the best person to see which tier your child will fit in by looking at how the child accesses the education within the classroom. For example, towards the bottom, I've got the last 3 there. Is the child having ongoing communication interaction difficulties which are impeding their social relationships and learning? So learning's got to come into it. Is the child having difficulty with sensory physical needs? Do they need more help? Do they need extra equipment? That kind of stuff. Levels will always play a part. If the autism that they have is not having any effect on their education and their levels, the teachers may not do anything, because it's actually the education and the levels which is at the center of the school's purpose, really. But if the child's autism is high enough, then it will affect their learning. Within the classroom, so we're going to look at some of those tiers now. They will be differentiated anyway according to their ability. So, for example, in literacy and numeracy, there is a lower set and a middle set and a higher set, and they're differentiated within the lower set and the higher set as well. And some children then are taken out of the classroom if they cannot access the lower of the lower set. Okay, so further differentiation within the lower set, literacy and numeracy lessons will then take place. there will be a learning support assistant in especially the lower set groups to help your child with any of their needs. And in the whole school curriculum, there is already PHSE, which stands for Personal, Social, Health and Education, which takes place to talk about different types of people, how we should interact with different kinds of people. This is all things that autistic children need to know. How to greet people, manners, how to say please, how to say thank you, how to smile. Circle time is also something which most schools actually have once a week in their classrooms. In circle time, the children, they will talk about their worries, any problems, any bullying issues. They may talk, for example, about the fact that when they talk to people, other people laugh at them, or other people tell them to do something and they do it. So autism can very easily be picked up during circle time. Part of circle time is actually worry boxes. So worry boxes are put in classrooms where children anonymously may place some of their worries and problems into the worry boxes, and the teacher opens them, the worry boxes, and then addresses the problems within circle time anonymously. If your child has a diagnosis, then they will get group or individual support in the form of an individual education plan. The child will actually write down all the things that he or she likes and what makes them happy, what people admire about them, how they feel they are best supported. And they will write this pupil profile themselves. This is actually one that I have made earlier, Blue Peter job for those of us who are as old as I am. And it's using that pupil profile then that the special needs coordinator will write a special educational needs provision plan. It used to be called an individual education plan in the olden days. And that is a very, very good item that will help your child. They need to be on the special needs register in order for this plan to be written up about them. And in this plan, they will have long-term targets, which are all the things they need to do to get better with their autism. And I've actually done one for autism here where I've written to improve social skills, to improve anger management in the playground. And I've written some strategies there to come to school towards the end of lunchtime or some calming down period on the computer, because that's something which Tommy in his pupil profile wrote that he likes to do. So all the things from the pupil profile are then incorporated into this SEND provision plan with the pupil's targets, and the parents also have a say in this as well. And then every term, this individual education plan is reviewed. That's a very, very good piece of document where everything is documented down, what the school is doing to help your child. And if they're not doing it, you can take them to task because it's a signed document, as you can see. You can tell them, well, actually, in his SEND provision plan, it said you are going to do this, then why is it not being done? So some of the group work that they may do, because it's documented on this plan, where they will be taken out into a small group, and this is a socially speaking program, which is very, very specific for people who have got autism, where you teach them appropriate social skills through good role modeling and games. And what I used to do when I used to run this program is I used to use some students who did not have autism to be the good role models in the games we used to play. And then the autistic children used to learn, this is what you have to do when you are in this situation. And it's done through a fun way where the child would not really know that he or she is different in any way. I do not agree for children at the primary age to know that they are autistic. They have huge levels of anxiety. They don't know what it means. They're too young to understand, and it can give them an excuse to behave the way they do inappropriately sometimes by saying, well, I'm autistic, so that's why I don't know how to be kind to you. And I have had this. I'm speaking from huge experience here. It is better that they do not know at the primary age. They do not need to know. Okay, so that is done in a small group. The other one is Time to Talk, which is a very, very good program. It's used to develop social skills and social interaction skills, and it can be used right up to secondary school. I mean, I mentioned I am a SEND governor at Kegs, which is a grammar school where there are gifted and talented children. Earlier on, I mentioned, yes, there are high-functioning autistics out there who go to grammar schools, and they use Time to Talk. So it can be used throughout your schooling. And you can find out from the special needs coordinator how they are getting on with these social skill programs, because for Ofsted, the special needs coordinator will be documenting everything down on how they are improving week by week in the program. And if they achieve that target 6 consecutive times, they may even be taken off the program. The SENCO does need to tell you when she does that, but it is up to you as parents to have regular liaison with the SENCO. When you go for parents' evenings, it is not just the class teacher you need to see, you need to go and see the SENCO as well. Lego therapy is something so interesting that was introduced actually to develop interview skills. And it's where there are 3 autistic children working together. And what they do is they describe Lego pieces to each other with the color, what it looks like, what it feels like. Then the other person, through instructions, builds something. So the instructions have to be very clear, to the point, and that develops really, really good social communication skills. I mentioned developmental dyspraxia last time, not just developmental, but on the whole, autistics will have display symptoms of dyspraxia. And there is a very interesting Madeline Portwood program that runs in the schools. And what she believes is somebody who's autistic has these traits when they walk on tiptoes or they walk in general. And this is a motor skills screening test, which shows they need to go on the program. And then the program, the way it works is you use the left and right sides of your brain, or you could crawl through a tunnel, or in this picture, the left leg is going to the right and the right leg is going to the left to rebuild those connections across the midline to again build up those neural pathways. Believe it or not, that can be done up to the age of 9, just like you can very easily learn a new language up to the age of 9 because your brain is still in the process of building up those neural pathways. We also took children out on bikes. There is a big process which runs where with bike riding, where the left and the right sides are working together, and this builds up neural pathways in the brain, which actually helps with autism. Now, if you look at some of the older generation, in the olden days, they would go out, they would play, and this is another reason why there's more autism nowadays. Some of the we used to play, skipping, hula hoops. Hopscotch is a very big one where you're using the left and the right side of your brain, and climbing frames. Climbing up those trees. It's another good one which helps with gross motor skills. And these kinds of things that we used to play as children, Scooby-Doos, Rubik's Cubes, marbles, jacks. Who remembers jacks? All that helps with fine motor skills. Again, the program is fully monitored if you want to find out how it's going. And there is clear evidence, even with fine motor skills, that they improve after the program. The top handwriting is from an autistic child, his handwriting before the program, and the bottom picture grid shows an autistic child whose handwriting has improved. Incentives are very, very important for autistic children. They thrive on people praising them. So every time they achieve something, even at home, give them a certificate, give them praise. If a child needs individual support, if they're on an education healthcare plan, then an occupational therapist or a physiotherapist will be allocated to the school. You may need to take them along for some initial assessments at the hospital, but the occupational therapist, physiotherapist will also give some gadgets to the teachers to use in schools. One of them is actually maybe pencil grips, how to hold their pencils, or things which can help with their attention, which I'm going to show you pictures of in a minute. The child has an EHCP. They may get an individual counsellor. This is very, very important to help with anxiety or any phobias that they may have. The individual counsellor may use art therapy and music to help the child, or cognitive behaviour therapy to help the child. Welcome that. Day-to-day mentoring is very, very efficient, and the learning support assistants help with that, to daily check up on your child if they are okay, or if they're having any problems in the playground. And that is actually a very quick way of counselling as well. Sometimes the parents are involved, and many, many times I would get parents involved. They were very, very depressed about their child's condition. And when they meet other parents who actually suffer from the same, it's very good for them. And also, sometimes whole family therapy is needed. You can access that through CAMS, Child Adolescent Mental Health Services, through the GP. And they will give you strategies on how to diminish anxiety at home. This slide gives you lots and lots of ideas on how anxiety can get better for children who have got autism. Salah or namaz is very, very good for autism. It relaxes you in so many different ways, and very good for your brain when you go into sajda. Everything about Salah is a whole package that can relieve anxiety and anger management and releases all your problems and worries to God. This is a very, very important program called the Black Sheep program. And it is a very good package to help with social and communication needs, to help speech and language problems through pictures, and looks at stories and sequencing and organizing of before and after, and what you think is going to happen next. Helps with imaginative play as well. Every child that is autistic definitely needs to know what is happening in the day because of the huge levels of anxiety. They need to know what is happening now, what you need to do now, and what will then happen after to relieve their anxiety. And this is actually on top of a child's folder so that she knows all the time not to worry, because this is what's going to happen next. And most teachers will also have visual timetables in the classroom with not only days of the week, but also what the weather's like. Even a weather change can actually increase anxiety in an autistic child. So all of these things you can actually have at home on the weekends. Where autistic children go downhill is it's all organized at school and they're absolutely fine, and they come home and they have a big freak out at the weekend. That's because parents need to mimic some of the strategies being used in schools at home. Visual timetables are very, very important for organization as well. There is another one to do with the weather. The occupational therapist may give gadgets for sensory problems. Here is somebody who needs the sensory input, and they have chewies over there on the left, and the ball there spiky to get that sensory input. They may be encouraged to eat crunchy snacks like carrots, which gives them the sensory input that they need, which I spoke about at the beginning. There's a fluffy pencil case on the right. You need to mimic that at home as well. And some of the inappropriateness, for example, I had a girl who kept pulling up her skirt and used to show it in the playground in front of everybody, and everybody would have a big laugh. And we actually had a chart there, which was very, very simplified, a sticker chart where the child would get a sticker every time for not putting up their skirt in maths, not putting up in assembly, not putting up in lunch. And when they got a sticker in all of those 7 boxes in a day, then they would get some incentive at the end of the day. Zentangle is a very important program, art therapy program, which an autistic child loves. Because they love art, they can play in there for hours. And this can be used as a treat when they are not behaving appropriately. And counsellors also use Zentangle. So while the child is colouring in the intricate patterns, the child then lets out all his problems and worries. And this is a weekly chart for good responses, not showing inappropriate behaviour, using smiley faces. So this is a 2-in-1 where you're also teaching that a happy face is green with a smiley, and an unhappy is an upside down smiley face, but also teaching them to behave appropriately. Once they get into the routine, everything is fine. This is a chart going to the toilet. We had a girl who just had phobia of going to the toilet because of germs. She didn't want to go to the school toilet and would constantly wet herself. So we had sticker charts to do with pets, which is something she was mad about, pets. That was one of her tiny interests that she liked. And she then, we used that as an incentive to get her to go to the toilet. So we need to think outside the box. Counsellor mentioned with children who also display ADHD traits, they may need extra provision. For example, they need to be at the front of a classroom because they display while doing their lessons. And here is another reward system on the right for somebody who was mad about space, and these are space stickers, and the one on the left is to fiddle about with if they have ADHD traits in the classroom. Blue tack is another one that they can use. All children who have got a diagnosis of autism and have got an EHCP do qualify for extra time in SATs or GCSEs or A-levels. Again, go through the SENCO. SENCOs are very important people to get this for you and be on the good side of them. This Essex Provision Guidance Toolkit will give you more strategies for autism. If I was to give you strategies for each and every trait an autistic displays, I'll be here all night. Okay, so this is the Essex Provision Guidance Toolkit. You can Google that. It has got hundreds of strategies for autistic children. But some of them I'm going to cover in a minute with the question and answer. All the children who have got EHCPs, annual review to look at how much progress they have made. And this is something that all schools have on their website, which shows how all the special needs provision that they have in that school, if you are choosing a school for the first time for your child who has autism. It's called the school's local offer. The last slide is a bit of reassurance for all of you crying parents out there. Every child is gifted. They just unwrap their packages at different times. They will learn in the future, and you will see that even at the beginning they may not want to do it. They may say they can't do it. They will do it in the end. And look at the top. Yes, they did it. And they would have achieved all their targets. At that stage, the SENCO can remove your child off the special needs register, but you as a parent do have a right to keep them there. Okay, so that is now the end, and we're looking now at questions.
Thank you very much, Sister Sidra, and thank you for a fantastic, comprehensive talk. I know that you're very passionate about this, and it comes through in your excellent presentation. And I think that if we let you, you would be quite happy to talk all night about it, because you feel so passionate about it, and you're so knowledgeable about this. And I think we might have to take you up on that sometime. But I think what we're going to do now is we're going to take some questions from the floor. Questions coming in, so we won't have plenty of time for you to answer those questions. And
yeah, that's good.
That's good.
I think we're going to get lots.
Yeah, so we've got lots of questions. Just bear with me 1 second. So in terms of questions, if I could ask people just to put some questions on the chat. I've already got some. It'll be easiest if you put it on the chat, or if you want to ask it personally, just say I'd like to ask a question myself. But otherwise, I'll read out your question in your name, if that's okay. So, Sister Ruxana Zaman asked, as children who are on the autism spectrum, as they grow up into adulthood, do they manage to cope with their autism or grow out of it? Once again, back to Sister Sidra, as they get into adults, do they manage to cope or do they grow out of it?
Yes, now that's a very interesting question and a very good question. They will never be cured, okay? That diagnosis really is there for life. However, they will learn to cope. They will learn that when somebody talks to you, you need to answer them. They will learn through, as they go on in life, they will learn the consequences of their actions and things like that. It will still not come naturally to them though, but they will learn, like I said, as they go along. They will get better. I can still spot it in adults, to be honest. Even now, I can spot autism in adults almost immediately. It depends who is coming across, and they will still, to a certain extent, feel a little bit awkward in social situations and show anxiety and things like that, and may not make eye contact and things like that.
Okay, thank you for that answer. So our next question is there any medical treatment as well for autism?
Okay, there is no medical treatment that will get rid of autism completely. However, for example, ADHD, Ritalin will help at least with the ADHD. Now, I'll tell you a story about this. There was a girl, she was very, very autistic. She actually needed to go into special school. And because she was so strongly autistic, she had huge ADHD traits. She could not sit still. She'd constantly interrupt when somebody was talking to her. So I recommended the parents to go and at least get the ADHD sorted out, which is much more easily sorted out. So they went away, and then that actually then helped with the ADHD and slowed her down. And then automatically her autism improved, because then her mind slowed down to think about what she was saying, to listen more, and to interpret what somebody was saying, to slow her mind down. So there are other ways in which you can make autism better, but it doesn't completely go. There is no cure.
Thank you for that. The next question is quite related to the previous question. Can a severely autistic child become less autistic as they get older? I think you've partially answered that question. So, but you might...
Yes, they will become less autistic because they will learn as they go along in life by copying others, by practicing. The other very important one is practice makes perfect. And what I do find is a lot of mums will shy away from taking their children to social situations. I personally believe if you take them to social situations, it will help them to become more accustomed, you see. It will help them to get used to things rather than keeping them away. They are not going to then learn the strategies that they need for future life. The more you expose them at an earlier age to social situations, the better it is for that child.
Okay, that's very, thank you for that. Another question from Sister Sophia. She's asking Sister Shadleen, she's asking, how do we know if the SEND plan is enough or if EHCP is necessary? You know, if a child is doing okay academically but is struggling with the behavior side of things, so that's a question as well. So whether...
Okay, there are two completely different questions here.
Yeah.
The first question, the SENCO will decide, the school will decide, basically. I feel sometimes, with my capacity as a teacher, I did feel sometimes parents were too pushy towards the EHCP because they just wanted individual support for their child without knowing the criteria. And then that EHCP would fall through and not go ahead. And then what would happen is you could not apply again until at least 6 months. Once the EHCP falls through, then the LEA, they need to see 6 months to see if that child has got worse or deteriorated before you apply again. It wastes so much time. And we need to really give that discretion to the teachers to decide, because they actually have all the levelling guidelines with them that can then decide whether they need the EHCP or not.
The question was if they are particularly doing okay academically but struggling with behaviour.
Yes, now it depends, you see. Now this is where there is, I think, a little bit of a blip in the system, unfortunately. If the behaviour is not affecting their academic levels, the school may not do anything, because the school's interest is in levels in education and accessing the national curriculum. However, if somebody is diagnosed with autism, you will still find that they are still upsetting other children within the classroom or stopping other children from doing their work. And under that basis, you know, get help. So it's basically, if you can get the SENCO on your side to see your side on things, it can still work. You can still get special needs support within the school.
I think a related question is from Sister Sherry Huck, is asking, thanking you for your presentation, and then said, could you please advise us what to do if you feel our SENCO is unable to fully support our child as they're still in training and haven't been able to offer support? What should one do in that situation?
That's a very difficult one, to be honest. That's like you saying that your child goes to a school where you don't like the teacher and you don't feel the teacher's good. You see, it's very, very difficult. First, you cannot change the SENCO. I mean, you can write a letter to the special needs governor if you feel that the SENCO is not up to scratch. But from my experience, according to government law, a school is not allowed to keep a SENCO unless they've got a master's nowadays. And 4 years experience as a teacher, on top of having special needs children in their classroom. That's going to be a hard case sometimes to argue against. It may be easier to just change school and look at the school local offer on the website, or go and visit a SENCO of another school. But that, I think, is a difficult one. To be very honest, the SENCO is usually a head teacher or a deputy school, and it's very, very difficult for even the governors to support the parent in that case, because obviously at what the head teacher wants. You know, if it's the head teacher herself who's the SENCO, then what you're supposed to do. It's a difficult one, that one.
Okay, thank you for the answer. Another question is from Sister Gulson is, my question is how to increase the Muslim carers for SEND people. You know, in other words, I think how to get more Muslims involved in the care for SEND people.
The only way is to spread awareness, like this masjid has beautifully done today. You have accessed so many Muslims, we've had so many people coming, and they've all gone away, and hopefully we have you know, educated people in the disorder, and we are trying to diminish the stigma, which will help a lot. And just to let everybody know that it's coming up to, you know, it used to be 1 in 100 people would be autistic. It's actually much more than that nowadays. There's actually, I would say, 1 or 2 per class of 30 nowadays. So, you know, just need to educate ourselves and spread the word, really. We need to have more mosques, really, who do autistic training like this, or lectures.
Okay, another question from Sister Haq to everybody is, from an Islamic perspective, what is the stance of medicating a child with ASD or ADHD if this has been recommended by a doctor? What's the stance, Islamic perspective?
Right, that's very, very good one, which I get all the time. God has said, Allah has said, look after your health, okay? And of course you are allowed to take a medicine. Otherwise, why do we take a paracetamol when we have a flu? Okay, with flus, they go away with paracetamol, but things like ADHD do not go away. So yes, medication is allowed, unless the medication is haram. For example, it may have alcohol in it, in which case you can take an alternative medication. But you are supposed to look after your health. You are actually harming your body by not taking medication. And one of the things forbidden in Islam is to harm your body. So, you know, we're not allowed to, for example, have lots of tattoos all over our body, or piercings all over our body. That's harming. Committing suicide is harming, or self-harming is not allowed in Islam. All of those things. So if you look at it under that banner, then yes, we should take medication if that's what the doctor prescribes. In fact, did you know it was Muslims who invented medicines? Look at the golden age of Islam, who invented pharmacies and medicines. And Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, did he not cure so many people by showing them herbal remedies? The black seed oil is one of them, is it not? Dates is another one, ajwa dates. All these different remedies, aloe vera for eyes, they are all medicines, are they not? So that's what the Sunnah says. And there is a book called The Medicine of the Prophet, full of medicines which the Prophet himself used and showed people to cure illnesses. So I think it's a very ignorant way of thinking, personally. I've had that question a lot lately, and it makes me a bit cross, to be honest. Why someone would think that. It does, doesn't it? I can't help getting cross at that one.
All right. So another question, well, it's actually a request. Could you do a talk on ADHD as well?
Yes.
You mentioned earlier on that you're happy to do some further talks. I think by the response that we've had from this, I think we'll be calling you back and asking you to some more talks. Would you be happy to do one on ADHD as well?
Of course. I have already been asked by some sisters on that SEND group, which I am on as well. Can they do a talk on ADHD? And I had a request on dyslexia as well. And I'm more than happy to do ones on mental health, bipolar, and also schizophrenia, and also dementia. All of those I have done talks.
Sure, inshallah.
I'm more than happy to do one on ADHD. I'd love to do that.
We'll see if we can organise one on ADHD and perhaps dyslexia, certainly. Another question that's come in is, what ASD resources online do you recommend for further information?
Okay, yes.
Stroke, homeopathy, for example, Islamic remedies to aid with, for example, anxiety via the non-medicated route. So there's quite a lot of sort of questions on that one.
Yeah. Okay, I'll try and remember all of that. So with the autism, every child will display different traits. There is not one autistic child that is the same as the other. So depending on what their traits are, it's those kinds of items that you can look for. The Autistic Society has quite a lot of ideas for gadgets and things, but also if you talk to the specialist teacher that may be allocated for your child in school, then they can have a look at, you can liaise with the teachers and they can give you the reports that the autistic specialist teachers give out to parents, which will have lots and lots of strategies which are specific to your child. With the Islamic is a very, very good question. And anxiety is covered in great depth by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, when you're anxious, then you should sit down, or you should lie down, or you should do wudu. Okay? All of that relieves anger, anxiety. Reading salah or namaz is so good for anxiety. You start off standing, which is the stress mode of the ANS system. And by the time you've finished your salah, you are down, sitting down calmly. The dua at the end, you're offloading all your problems, worries, stresses to Allah. That is free counseling for your anxiety. Also, the meditation process, when you are doing your dua, but when you're also in sajda, it calms your anxiety. Very, very good for you. The Quran itself, did you know, is like a sedative. It calms down your anxiety. Naturally, you are saying the word of Allah. So the more dhikr you can do, the more namaz, salah you can do to offload your worries and problems. Each time you do wudu, all of that is non-medical or non-herbal remedies.
Great, Jazakallah for that. I think the question also asked if there's any ASD resources online. Is there anything online that you can
Yes, there is. So the Autistic Society has online links for ASD resources which you can use, but there will only be things like some of those gadgets, the sensory gadgets that you press and things. For the social skills, you will need books. So Amazon, eBay will have books like Time to Talk, Socially Speaking books. Lego therapy, all you need is a pack of Lego. That's all you need for that. Also, invent games, role play games. You know, you can do role play with your children. You can say, right, I'm a guest, I'm coming into the house. I say, Assalamu alaikum, what do you say back? If somebody says, how are you? What do you say back apart from okay? So the very best thing you can do with autism is role play and take them to social situations where they will learn from good role models. Parents also need to set that good role model as well for the children.
Okay, that's very helpful. So is there any other questions that anybody else wants to ask?
Yes, I've got a friend. Her son is autism and he's about 19 years old. So what can she do?
Okay, You can get an adult diagnosis. You can do that. Again, you need to go to the same route through the GP, who will then refer you to a consultant, who will then do some tests on you and tick lists and things like that. Unfortunately, with autism, there are no brain images and things. The diagnosis is completely based on your behavior and on what information you give to the doctor. And then after that, there are adult autistic programs that you can go to, or courses to educate yourself is the best thing. And all the things that you learn then in the courses, if you then try and self-help strategies, it's the only thing that you can do when you're 19. Self-help strategies, but it's not too late. Not too late at all.
Okay.
And many, many social skills as an adult.
He wants to go to college.
Yes. So I would recommend he gets that diagnosis before he goes to college, and then the college can then implement some of the strategies which will be written diagnosis as well. A diagnosis always helps with getting the help. That's the first actually that larger institutes will ask. You cannot just go up to a university, for example, and say, I've got autism, because obviously they want evidence. And if you haven't got evidence from the previous schooling, then you will need to go out and get the diagnosis. If his was diagnosed, then all the paperwork should automatically go to his college. It's automatically moved from the college upwards. All the school stuff goes to wherever he goes up to the age of 25. They're like medical records, like when you move on to a new area, the medical records move on with that person. So it's the same thing. That's a legal requirement up to the age of 25, which covers right up to PhDs and doctorate degrees. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sister Azmina, for that question. Thank you. So that's really helpful. I have got just a couple of quick questions, if I may. I thought I'll keep them till the end. One quick question I wanted to ask you is regarding if the diagnosis has been missed in childhood, and the adult has reached adulthood and maybe even to their 40s and 50s. How does one treat that type of thing? I mean, I know that that person has probably overcome some of the things, but if they do still exhibit some of the autistic features, is there any help available for those people who've kind of been missed, the lost tribe?
There is actually. First of all, like you said, a lot of those people who have not had a diagnosis will in the future, they would have overcome some of the difficulties themselves naturally through trial and error. But there is actually counselling. They will definitely need counselling to help them to understand, the world around them and things like that. And also cognitive behaviour therapy, which is CBT, which is quite rife out there, can also help them to change their way of thinking in adulthood. So that's another thing that they can do as well.
Really helpful. That's really helpful. I think I might ask you a bit more detail about that offline, inshallah. The second thing I wanted to very quickly ask is, a lot of us have watched the film Rain Man, which is about an autistic it's about as you know, it's about the subject is about autism, and some people have particular skills and talents. Have you ever come across children who've got very special skills of high sort of memory or something like that? Have you ever come across anyone like that? Or
Yes. Believe it or not, every single special need child that I have come across has a huge talent somewhere. And it's really, really amazing, because it reminds me of what Allah has said. So there's a hadith that everybody has 45 hasanats. So for example, you may be disabled in something, but you may be really, really brilliant at something else. So all of us are not good at everything. Every single person has negative points somewhere. And we need to remember that really as Muslims. So whatever good or bad, one of the Imam Mufassals is that everything good and bad is from Allah. and that is what he has destined for our destiny, and they may be good in it, even though we do not know now, you know. So that same child, with all the hardships that you're going through with that child, maybe the reason is to test you and will take you to Jannah in the future. But yes, I have come across many, many children who have got autism, and they are, for example, brilliant artists, gifted and talented, because some of them have very, very narrow interests. Their full force then is in those interests. For example, Beethoven was supposed to be autistic. He was Asperger's apparently, and he had the huge talent in music. You know, think of that. Einstein is the other one, isn't it? Einstein was autistic, and he was a huge, you know, talents there, massive IQ. I have come across one special need child, which she makes me laugh, because we had a big laugh at her, astaghfirullah, all the teachers. We thought, you know what is she actually good at? She was not good at anything. She was very, very weak in each and every subject we could think of, and each and every area of schooling. And then one day we had a talent competition in the school, and she stood up without asking anybody, and she sung. She sung on that stage, and the whole school started crying. And we just laughed and thought, you know what, that's what a talent is, it's singing. So we found her talent. So a single child out there that I know who does not have a talent somewhere.
Okay, now that's really interesting, and that's a lovely note to end on, pardon the pun. Inshallah, we'll meet again, inshallah. And so now we're going to wrap it up. Once again, a big thank you to Sister Sidra for such a wonderful talk. We will be getting you back, inshallah. You've been getting lots and lots of thank yous and praise from the group, as you can see in the chat. Once again, thank you for Sister Sidra for a wonderful talk. Thank you, it's fantastic.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for having me, and I really, really did enjoy it actually. And for the first time actually, I've done a talk like this for a Muslim audience. It's the first time I've done that. So I'm really, really pleased, like I said at the beginning, that Muslims are taking a subject like this seriously, which is important.
I think what you've done here also is that you've raised awareness, and I think you've made it easier for people to understand some of the traits of autism, which, you know, as parents, you know, got a lot of parents out there and grandparents, you might be able to, you know, understand autism better, and also understand the process that needs to be followed and the treatments that are available. So I think you've really sort of, you know, kindled an interest, and I think you've also demonstrated this is more prevalent than we originally thought, and what the reasons could be that why it's a bit more prevalent now than it used to be. Sister Alex wanted to say something about this, the CICC SEND group as well, and you know, it'd be nice for her to just say a couple of words.
Okay, thank you. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. CICC runs a sisters carers group for mothers and carers of children with SEND. So if any sister would like to join, please send a WhatsApp message to our helpline. I understand that some of you are attending this talk, probably know Sister Sidra, or in one of her groups, you can pass it on through that. The number is 0759 894 1828. If in the message you can please include your name and the reason that you want to join the SEND group, because it is only for carers or mothers. If there is sufficient interest for a brothers group, we would be happy to open one up, but again, we need to know. Thank you very much. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah, Sister Alex. So I just wanted to say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to everybody, and keep safe. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Walaikum salam.
Thank you, Sidra.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Sidra.
I love
Thank you.
Nice to hear all the lovely voices that I recognise.
Thank you, my dear.
Thank you very much. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Allah Hafiz. Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and thank you.
Allah Hafiz.